Hi, everyone. This is Jacqueline from She Rises Studios, and welcome to today's author celebration. We are thrilled to celebrate the release of Mastering Clinical Research Pathway to a Six Figure Career by Nadine Spring, which has already become a USA bestseller in 14 different Amazon categories. If you've ever felt stuck in a low paying, high burnout healthcare job, this book is your roadmap to jump out. Whether you're a nurse, a recent grad, a career changer wondering how to break into clinical research, this is the guide that will walk you from confusion to confidence and from survival mode to six figure success. So get ready because today we're not just talking about changing careers, we're talking about changing lives. Hello, Nadine, and congratulations to the release of your book, Mastering Clinical Research.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's been quite a journey, and I'm so excited to see where this book goes. Thank you, Jacqueline.
You're welcome, and I'm sure you will be reaching a lot or touching a lot of other people's lives. Can you tell us what inspired you to write this book?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, touching other people's lives, I've received personal messages about how helpful the book has been for them so far from people who've been reading it. But in terms of what inspired me to write this book, it was basically my journey into clinical research. And I talked
Mhm.
about that at the beginning of the book. And it was not a field that I had ever considered as a child or even while in college. And I
Mhm.
landed in the field by accident. And it happens to be the only field I've worked in. I ended up, starting entry level in the field, fresh out of college with just a bachelor's degree as a research assistant, working my way up to, becoming director of clinical research, then eventually becoming a professor of public health, where now I train the new generation of researchers and also owning my own company, Springwell 360. So what motivated me to write the book was really to inspire others to enter into the field of clinical research, especially as we know in the field, we have an issue of underrepresentation in clinical research. So, if we can
Yes.
have more representation in the workforce, it can really help with driving that needle forward towards health equity.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful news. And I'm so happy that people have already reached out to you and gave you, good feedback, positive feedback about the book. Now, can you tell us who is this book really for and why now is the perfect time for it?
Sure. So this book is for people who may be in high school. Could be people already working in the medical professions, whether they are a nurse, could be an RN or an LPN or a CNA, or even, if people who may be phlebotomists or medical assistants, who may have felt like their role as a phlebotomist or a medical assistant may have plateaued, but by
Hmm.
becoming entering into the field of research, now they can, climb a career ladder, right? Now they have potential for growth. And in this book, I lay out strategies on how, they can start to think about and dream about a potential pathway for climbing that corporate ladder if that is their desire. So that's who this book is for, college students, high school students, recent graduates, people who may already be in the medical field and trying to consider, hey, what do I do with myself next? Just to let them know that the field of clinical research exists and it's a
Hmm.
viable career pathway.
That's wonderful. And as you've mentioned, this is a way, clinical research is a way to advance their career. Um, can you share, or maybe can you bust a myth for us that's commonly an incorrect mindset when it comes to clinical research?
Well, one of the myths I often hear, and this could be with patients who want to participate in a research study or, or
Mhm.
considering it. One of the myths I often hear is I won't participate because I don't want to get a placebo. But that's a myth because in reality, it's unethical to withhold treatment from someone and give them a placebo or a sugar
Mhm.
pill if, a viable treatment option exists. So traditionally, what you may be receiving is the current approved standard of care and
Mhm.
or maybe the experimental therapy. So that's one of the myths in clinical research. And of course, people who work in the field may know that. But I've found that, for people who work in medicine who may not have training in research, they may hold on to that myth because they don't really understand the ins and outs of the research process itself.
That's wonderful, and it's very insightful because a lot of people are not really we very limited understanding on what clinical research really is. And can you give an example of the most common roles available, and for if people are interested in transitioning to clinical research, what would their day-to-day activities would look like?
Sure. So the clinical research is a vast field. And you can go into so many ways. You can go into accounting, finance for clinical research. You can go into the
Mhm.
legal parts of contracting for clinical research. But in terms of the general entry pathway for
Mhm.
clinical research, I would say that starting as a research assistant or clinical research coordinator. And what would be some of those responsibilities? It could be interviewing participants, potential participants for a study, screening for eligibility criteria for particular research study, whether that's age, blood pressure parameters,
Mhm.
certain lab values, like screening medical records to find potential participants for a study, consenting participants, and there are steps to ensure that informed consent is properly is done properly with making sure that the participant understands, making sure that it's voluntary, collecting data, collecting biomedical specimen, storing it. Sometimes some lab samples may need to be stored in a freezer for a certain amount of time,
Mhm.
processing and shipping out the samples to the labs, entering the data, helping with any sort of data analyses queries, things like that. So those are all day to day into the role of clinical research. And the key thing to remember is when you're working in research, you're playing a huge role in advancing science and medicine because it's that data from the research studies that then determines how medicine is practiced, or any new therapies that may be brought into the market, any updates to diagnostic criteria, any new medical devices. These are all based on what the research participants are giving us.
That's true, and a lot of people would think that because it has the word research, that this is just the most boring desk job where you just look at your computer the entire day. But actually, it encompasses a whole lot more. Now, your book promises practical steps. um, what are one or two tips readers can implement immediately to get closer to shifting or maybe getting a clinical research job?
So, one of the things I shared in the book is the power of volunteering, right?
Mhm.
There are organizations in clinical research that may need volunteers. And by volunteering, you may learn skills that you may not learn at any of your employers. And these are skills that you can put on your resume. These are skills that could be transferable to any clinical research, role. And by volunteering, whether it's 1 or 2 hours per month, you can gain so much in the long run in terms of an increase in your salary as you keep climbing the ladder, and using what you're gaining from volunteering to help help build your resume, help build your skills, and leveraging it strategically. So that's one of the tips I share in the book about things that you can do to help get into the field. It doesn't happen overnight, but with being strategic and planning and thinking with the end in mind, you can get there.
That's wonderful, and that's actually a very wonderful, very practical tip. You don't need to be a rocket science. You don't have to have a master's degree or a PhD of some sort. Um, if you wanted to really shift your career, you can start with as simple as volunteering. A couple of hours of your day would really earn you a lot. That's wonderful. Now, if there is anything if there's one thing that you would like your readers to take away from your book, what would that be?
The one thing I'd like to take my readers to take away is health equity. Um,
Mm,
we need diverse participants in medical research studies to help to advance medicine. We know that certain groups have been historically underrepresented. And
mhm.
by having this book, raising awareness of clinical trials as an as a pathway, it's also helping to raise awareness of clinical trials as an option to care. And the one thing I want people to take away is that if you imagine a world where health equity exists, where everyone has, access to therapeutic agents, medical devices, diagnostic criteria that really work for all, where you're not seeing a lot of these health disparities. If you can imagine that world where health equity exists, think about how we can get there. And clinical trials is one of the ways to get there. And so that would be my take home message is, to raise awareness of clinical trials, clinical research as a career pathway, and also to raise awareness of clinical trials as an option to medical care.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for that. Now, if there are people out there who would like to connect with you for maybe mentorship or coaching or and ask for additional resources, how can they connect with you?
Sure. So I am on YouTube. I have some videos there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and it's all at Springwell360. You can also reach me directly via my email, which is Nadine at springwell360.com, or visit the website www.springwell360.com. And I'm pretty responsive on either of those platforms that I've mentioned.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And do you have any final words that you'd like to share with someone who's ready for a career change but is still a little unsure if they're qualified?
Just I went into the field with just my bachelor's degree, and then I climbed. Every few years I was climbing, and I happened to have gone on to additional degrees and advanced degrees while I was working in the field. But I would say sleep on it, pray on it, and then make the best decision that's right for them. But I have to say that a career in clinical research has been very rewarding for me, and I've noticed that for the other people who I've worked with along the years.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Nadine. Thank
You're
you for pouring
welcome.
your expertise, your passion, and your proven strategy into this book that's already changing lives, as you mentioned earlier, across the country. Your work is a beacon for so many who are ready to rise into something more. So, for everyone that's listening, Mastering Clinical Research Pathway to Six-Figure Career is now available on Amazon. Go ahead, grab your copy, start building a career that pays what you're truly worth. We'll see you on the path to purpose and prosperity. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye bye.